in those difficult times, maybe let's start off with your top 3 items that people should have on their grocery list.
Full shopping cart of toilet paper and make sure nobody else gets any.
Welcome to the Upside Strength Podcast, the #1 fitness resource in Switzerland, where we interview coaches, personal trainers, strength and conditioning coaches, gym owners, nutritionists to bring you the best information possible. Today on the podcast, I have Ryan Hickey. Ryan is a nutrition coach based in Vancouver, Canada. He specializes in resolving poor nutrition and lifestyle habits to help clients get the most out of their workouts. Ryan's favorite topics are sustainable habit integration, the psychology of change, as well as our current nutritional environments. Ryan, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Excited.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So in those difficult times, maybe let's start off with your top 3 items that people should have on their grocery list besides toilet paper and pasta.
Full shopping cart of toilet paper and make sure nobody else gets any.
Exactly.
Just kidding. Be reasonable. That's a good question. So I think that would vary from person to person, depending on any intolerances or whatnot. But obviously, we're talking about somewhat restricted options because most people are going to be looking for things that are going to be less perishable. I think where a lot of people are making the mistake is going for everything canned, and basically it's like canned soup and pasta is all completely ravished at the grocery store. So what I've stocked up on myself is just a big bag of brown rice, got oats, and canned fish, canned meats, if you can, are great. But we talked about this off air before, as well as I got protein powders stocked up. So I guess I'm kind of not sticking to your top 3 options, but
I give a top 10. I'm cool with that.
Top 5, top 10 sounds good. Yeah, I'm just such a big proponent of figuring out what works for you. So a lot of people, the best thing that even though we're restricted, you're still going to be grocery stores are still going to be open, so hopefully. So it's one of those things where get something that you prefer, and whether that's even oats or potatoes or fresh stuff, you can still get. There's frozen vegetables. Even if you want to stock up on fresh fruit and peel and cut bananas and throw them into a jar and put them in the freezer for smoothies and stuff like that. So trying to think outside the box. When you go to the grocery store, you see nothing but fresh stuff available. But if you think about it, I mean, you can go to the bigger stores and they have all those options frozen as well. Those will be gone. So think outside the box. You might want to buy a bunch of ripe avocados, cut them up, dice them up, and freeze those as well. Or you do the same for apples. You're not going to want to defrost them and eat them, but think smoothies. So stock up on protein powder. I bought a bunch of greens as well to put in the freezer. So those last for a long time in smoothies. So tons of options, and you got to get creative.
Yeah, I guess maybe to give a bit of context to the discussion, where getting into the hard part of that pandemic of the coronavirus here in Switzerland. Again, to give a bit of context, gyms are closed, public spaces are mostly closed. You're allowed to go outside. Offices are still open to some extent, although people are recommended to work from home. From what I understand, Canada is in the fairly similar situation now. And so we're going to try and orient that discussion around how to make the best choices from a nutrition and lifestyle standpoint when we're either spending a lot more time at home than we're used to, or even hopefully not, but unfortunately I think that's where we're going, being at home for long periods of time with no really better option than this. So I guess in that context, Ryan, we talk about staying at home for people that are not used to being at home for long periods of time. What do you recommend they do in terms of setting up their day-to-day so that we keep some semblance of structure and not just spend every day on holiday mode with pajamas from morning to evening?
Yeah, some are bound to do that in the short term, but it won't take long for them to realize that that's not a good strategy to take. Good question. So I would say, as best you can structure a reasonable schedule, that for me seems to work. Again, the answer is going to be somewhat contextual and dependent on the individual, how they work best. But for me, and for clients that that I'll be sort of re-strategizing with over the next week or two here, we'll be looking at things they'd like to accomplish. So obviously I do nutrition, but lifestyle definitely flows into that as well. So it applies to your eating habits as well. To want to avoid, like you said, being in your pajamas all day and just snacking, and then before you know it, you step on the scale and you've gained 5 pounds in 2 weeks. What you'll want to do is look at this as an opportunity to, again, relative to each specific scenario, as an opportunity to get some stuff that you've been wanting to get done. So how I'm approaching it is sticking to a somewhat structured schedule with regards to my eating. I'm not huge on saying you need to eat at a certain time. Generally, I really prefer having my clients and even myself get more of an intuitive eating process, where you're really tapping into your natural hunger cues and eating when you truly feel the need to, but having prepared and have good food ready. But in this case, because circumstances are so unique, and like you said, people are going to be spending a lot more time at home, I think it is a good idea to maybe set that structure and think, hey, I'm someone who likes to have 3 whole food meals per day. So I am going to eat at 8 a.m. when I wake up, or whenever that is, and noon and 5. Some people would like to compress that into 2 meals. Some even do 1 meal, as you know, people who intermittent fast and whatnot. So really it's preference, and but setting that kind of structure can help many, and also taking advantage of, again, the opportunity to get things done, but not looking at it aimlessly, looking at it like, hey, I've wanted to read this particular book, so set that, make a calendar for your day. That's been tremendously helpful for me. And now that everybody is going to be working from home or not working at all for a period of time, then I can tell you from personal experience, I'm assuming that most people are going to benefit from sticking to a structured schedule. So if that's like, I am going to have breakfast at this time, and I'm going to have a time block to read, leave your phone on airplane mode or do not disturb, and set a timer and get your reading in, and then have your lunch, and then get your work done, or whatever that looks like for you. But a schedule is important, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Since we did the transition to not yet enforced by the government, but just decided to stay at home with Lynn and the kid, just to protect others and protect ourselves as well. It's incredible the difference in let's say the caloric need over a day when you're out and about and working, and then when you're just home. I mean, I caught myself yesterday just going to eat because I'm used to eating, but realizing that I was not hungry at all.
Totally, man. That's the going to be a big focus of the content that I'm going to be putting out, because it's a big challenge for me. And again, I feel like I've been preparing for this much longer than the average person, because I've been working from home for about almost 4 years now. And that was and continues to be a struggle, because you're right there. The fridge is right there. If you're someone like me who prepares food, you've got good quality food, but nonetheless, you can still overeat, right? So you've got this stuff ready to go, and your mind, it's amazing how often, if you're a human being, it shifts towards wanting to consume food, and a lot of times mindlessly. And now that, like you said, where our expenditure in terms of calories is going to be falling off a cliff for most of us who are not going to be out and about, walking around, maybe not doing as full and thorough of workouts as we're used to, because we don't have access to gyms. We have to take that into consideration. An real quick, easy tip that I've been looking at is I'm a huge advocate of carbohydrates. I'm not anti-carb, but without doing any crazy workouts, that's kind of my first thing that I'll adjust. I'll have a bit of a less of a need for carbohydrates. So you definitely do have to keep an eye on that. And I would suggest people to get on that train as early as you can. Another thing, scale weight, that I don't like people getting super connected to. This is a circumstance, an unusual circumstance, where it might be beneficial to be stepping on the scale even daily in the short term, just to make sure that you're not trending in a poor direction, because it's that first week or two when things can happen fast. You pack on some extra fat, and then you just go, screw it. I'm going into hibernation mode, even though summer's coming.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
So I think those are two really good points. So getting maybe the carb intake a little bit lowered at first, and then maybe using that scale, like you said, to make sure that in the first 2 or 3 weeks, you're not just going way overboard with your food because you're just used to eating a lot, but now you're staying home. Do you have any other tips for people that are going to, have a big lifestyle shift, and from, getting out of the house maybe 10 hours a day to not getting out of the house or very little?
Yeah, I would say as quick as you can. Again, I'm assuming that most people watching this are going to be at least interested in exercise. So as soon as you can, shifting to an at-home based workout, or if it's nice outside, find a nice empty field or open space to do some outdoor workouts. You've been amazing at providing content for that, and I know you're doing like a free group that you can join for at-home workouts. So that's phenomenal. I think a lot of people in the health and fitness space are doing awesome stuff like that, and I'm looking at this as an opportunity to really sort of build my reputation in that sense as well, and try and be as helpful as possible. We got roofs to put over our heads and mouths to feed, so business continues, but I'm gonna definitely do my part and try. And you even specifically, Sean, have inspired me to really sort of look at that, put those glasses on, to think, how can I, this is challenging, very challenging for many people, and it's going to be pretty morbid times for a lot of humans. So as best as we can offer free assistance or just good quality information, I'm taking it kind of upon myself to try and do that. That was a big tangent. I digress. Basically, so get on an at-home workout plan as soon as you can.
Yeah, that's really important. And then in that same line, we're talking about not being able to go to the gym anymore. most people might not have had the time to, gather equipment and actually have weights at home. And if you're working with a substantial amount of weight at the gym, you've put on a good amount of muscle mass over the months or the years that you've been training. How do you now maintain that muscle mass with very little training time and also really very little equipment?
Yeah, good question. And I would preface it with, I am not a movement expert. I'm more on the nutrition side. I leave the actual movement mechanics to guys like you. With that said, I love, I'm kind of a recreational bodybuilder myself, and I have tinkered with CrossFit and Olympic lifting and powerlifting and such in the past. So yeah, it's a big not concern for me, but it's a big topic of awareness for myself personally. So what I'm going to be doing is higher volume, closer to failure, making sure that my protein intake is sufficient. So
What do
again,
you
like,
call sufficient? I know it's,
so
for most people, but if you have a range to recommend for people that, again, want to maintain that muscle mass and that do still do some workouts at home and stuff like that, what would be your recommendation?
yeah, good question. So if you are counting macros and you're looking for an exact protein target, I mean, I typically, you guys are in kgs over there, yeah?
Yeah.
So I aim for 2.2, which is like the upper end of standard recommendations.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's kind of that's 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So um there's a range, and it's going to be, again, I I don't like to get super specific with that stuff because it's going to be more personal preference. There is going to be a sort of a minimal range where, and again, it's all relative to your goals, right? So for a guy like me, I'm aiming for that upper range because I have built a reasonable amount of muscle mass, and I'm going to be going from, you know, lifting a reasonable amount of weight on a barbell to using things like bands and body weight stuff. And that is definitely something where if I were to hit too low of a protein intake and not do enough volume as far as the much lighter weights that I'm going to be using, then I suspect I would start to waste away a bit. But I'm not concerned because again, it's putting an emphasis on a great tip that I have with that is exactly like you see. That's not even planned, having that band in the backgrounds just so that, you know, the viewers think that I'm practicing what I preach. That is actually a hack for me because you walk by it, right? It's the same as the chin up bar. If things are out there, so if you put your stuff out there, you know, following a exercise routine and being like, okay, this is my time to work out and I'm going to do it for an hour and get a good sweat on. That's great. That works for many people. And again, because we're so unique in what works for individuals, for some, it might look more like they don't want to do that. Leave your stuff out. And they're just, every time they walk by the chin up bar, they're doing 5 chin ups or 1 chin up or 15 chin ups, whatever they can do. And over time, that accumulates. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, so definitely higher protein intake throughout the day, and then, like you said, higher volume work. Considering we're going to have lower loads to work with, from the lifestyle standpoint, can you talk about the impact of sleep on muscle mass and how important it is to sleep well if you want to keep your gains?
that is massive. And I am a huge proponent of sleep and good sleep. And I've gone down deep down the rabbit hole myself in terms of trying to hack my sleep. I've had really serious sleep issues, and I just recently, like the end of last year, was diagnosed with severe sleep apnea. I had up to 32 point something interruptions per hour when I was stopping breathing. So I actually have a CPAP now. That's obviously going to be a whole other thing for some, but just sleep, proper sleep habits, getting good sleep, taking this opportunity to catch up on sleep. You and I both know there's so much great data out there as far as actual scientific studies that have shown, the one that I like to just call out that is simple to understand is, when you are chronically sleep deprived, not only is your body going to be less sufficient at burning fat, but it's also way worse at building muscle. So in terms of muscle retention and all this, when things are changing, your diet's going to be changing, your exercise routine and overall movement is going to be changing. Sleep is going to play such an important role. And I made a couple notes because I was reading a study the other day, which I made a post about. Or sorry, I haven't posted about this one yet, but there was a study where they had two groups and both were put on a 10% caloric deficit. So it was a hypocaloric diet. So they were going to lose weight. One group slept for 5.5 hours. The other group slept for 8.5 hours. They actually both ended up losing approximately the same amount of weight, which was 6 kilograms. So they both lost 6 kilograms. So you're thinking, okay. The crazy part was that the group sleeping 5.5 hours, they lost 55% less fat mass, and 65% of the weight they lost was lean mass. I don't know if I said that good in a way that you guys, the viewers, can understand, but
They
essentially
lost 4 kilos of muscle mass.
Exactly. So I did the math. Basically, I transferred this into pounds, which is why I'm kind of stalling here. But
just shoot it down, and I can help you with the.
Cool. Yeah. So the group sleeping 5.5 hours lost, like I said, 6.6 pounds in total, and of which 5.3 pounds was lean mass.
Oh, geez. Okay. So that in kilos, that would be about 2.8, 3 kilos total of weight loss. And then about 2.5 out of that 3 was muscle mass. So the vast majority of what they lost was muscle mass.
Exactly. Whereas the group with the 8.5 hours of sleep, granted, I don't know if they were resistance trained or not. So they were expected to lose some lean mass, but it was just significantly less. So sleep more.
Can you give some advice in terms of how to set up your sleep environment so that you do get more sleep and better sleep?
Totally. Avoid caffeine. I tend to cut myself off of caffeine, none after noon, but I think that's a very common mistake, is people don't realize how long the half-life of caffeine is. So again, contextual to the individual. Some people metabolize it faster than others, but don't be drinking late afternoon coffees and energy drinks, and even dark chocolates and such late in the evening. There's a lot of things that have hidden caffeine content. Diet pops, a lot of them do this kind of thing. So for me, that's really important. Light exposure, artificial light exposure in the evening, as well as natural light exposure in the morning. That's going to be a tougher one for people who are being really cautious and trying to avoid outdoors. So if you're in more of an isolated area, like not a condensed city and you can, go out for a walk in the morning to get some natural sunlight. Do that. It really benefits your natural serotonin, melatonin hormones throughout the day. And then in the evening, avoiding screen time or wearing blue blocking glasses, and getting into just a decent routine, like having a consistent schedule. Again, not taking this opportunity to just let everything go to shit and like sleep in super late one day and be up all night watching Netflix the next. So if you can try and stay consistent, that's been very instrumental to me getting a hold of my own sleep schedule and issues.
So in the evening, avoid screens. So maybe a good opportunity to recommend some books to people that they can spend some time reading in the evening when they're not watching Netflix late at night.
100%. Yes, reading is going to be, I think there's going to be lots of reading being done for those that aren't flicking through social media. Yeah, I mean, some of my favorites, like the book that you and I first bonded off of was 4 Hour Work Week. That's still one of my favorites. And I'm a big Tim Ferriss fan. He's got a bunch of others as well. Obviously, Tribe of Mentors, Tools of Titans, those kinds of things. A book that I've been reading about recently, I'm currently in, is called Influence. It's by Robert Cialdini, I think. Cialdini, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but he's got a PhD in psychology, and that's been a phenomenal read. It's gives you some insight into a lot of marketing tactics that are used, that can be positively beneficial for you and just even human interaction, and also help you avoid getting lured into some of these things. He's basically, the quick premise is that although he's a PhD in psychology, he's self-proclaimed been a guy who's been a sucker for like good salesmen all his life. So he got really curious about it and started doing a ton of research and basically discovered a whole bunch of various tactics that people use. And so that's been a fascinating read. And yeah, I mean, the list could go on. Most of my stuff is kind of self-help with regards to my particular industry. So it's like nutrition, wellness. I read the book Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker, which really got the wheels turning in a lot of ways about my sleep. So those are just.
Do you have maybe a nutrition book to recommend for people that are going to be stuck at home more than they're used to and maybe never had the opportunity to learn about nutrition and try to do better things in that realm and want to start? What's a good starting point?
A good starting point. That's a good question. The majority of the nutrition stuff I read is more on the textbook side of things, but I would say a great starting point is, I'll give a little plug to Precision Nutrition. They have such incredibly easy to digest articles and a whole whack of them. There's just an abundance. They've got an entire database of these really well-written scientific articles that are digestible to average people, and they're all online. So I think that's the best place to start. And yeah, that would be kind of my main, a really positive quality resource of like I said, scientifically based, easy to digest nutrition and lifestyle articles.
I'll make sure to link that one in the description below the video, so people can just click the link and go check out all those great articles. It's true that they always have great infographics, and it's very visually easy to digest, like you said, and understand. So I think that's a great resource for people to start looking into. Have you given any thought to what this current situation, this pandemic, and subsequent possibly lockdown of many countries, what might that do to our, the food system that we have going on right now? How might it impact it?
Sean, I don't know. I'm really curious about that myself, and the rational side of me thinks like, well, there's still going to be deliveries of food, because that can be a pretty self-isolated act to, like, hopefully the warehouses or whatever are just taking the steps they need to take to be incredibly sanitary and isolated, and then load the trucks. But again, I don't know anything about that industry, so it is a concern, and I think that's why people are overreacting and like hoarding food. I don't think that's the right way to go about it. My suspicion, I've got, a couple weeks of food reserves, um, and more if things get really rough because of just having certain dry goods. But I don't want to just be eating rice for a month. So I'm banking on being able to continue to like take as isolated as possible trips to the grocery store for some lean meats and whatnot. But yeah, the short answer is I don't know. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
I think it might reshape the way we think about downtime, because all of a sudden we're forced to have so much of it, and we might not know what to do with it at first. But maybe, we live in such a fast-paced life, especially in big cities where it's always work, 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 and scheduling coffee with a friend is like a I'll see you in 4 weeks kind of deal. And so maybe we'll learn through this to appreciate those times where nothing's happening a bit more. And like you said, read books or even just do nothing. When's the last time? I mean, I have a really hard time doing nothing for any significant period of time. I always have. I have a to-do list the length of my arm, and it never gets shorter because I always find stuff to add on to it, and I love it that way. But at the same time, I could probably use a little bit of slowing down. So maybe that's an opportunity, kind of a forced opportunity to do a bit more of this. And maybe going back to, people that might be living alone that don't have a partner. How important is it to stay connected with our friends, with our family, even if it's via video chats and just phone calls? Like I think we're going to get to the point where it's going to be tricky. So what can we do to stay connected in that regard?
That's a great point, man. And you said it. I think it's like this. It's taking opportunities to do. I mean, that's the amazing side of this. You can imagine it if you can see. There's many silver linings to everything. Things can always be worse. If you can imagine this scenario 20 years ago, um, yeah, it'd be lot worse, because this is when we can, we always think the application of technology with business and productivity and all that is great. But like you said, this is kind of a interesting, and also can be seen as a neat opportunity to use this kind of thing, FaceTime, video chats, to stay connected. And it's one of the things where I'm trying to formulate in my head early on here about how I can, like we said before, take the opportunity to like help out as best we can, and extract the positive elements of social media. I think that I'm gonna that's gonna be a fine line to walk. For those who are like experiencing anxiety and depression or angst or whatever, I think the best thing they can do is like delete social media from their phone for a certain time, because all we're seeing is negative. Again, that's dependent on who you're following, but a lot of it is negative news around COVID-19. So that might alleviate some of your stress and anxiety. But on the other side of that, I'm trying to think about ways to, you know, build communities or join communities online, because we don't know how long this is going to last. And so if you can get that connection, which a lot of people have for many years online, that's an amazing component of it. But yeah, like again, I'm going to be restructuring my schedule and saying like, do a FaceTime with a friend every day or something, you know. Connect with whoever you're isolated with, your significant other, your family, connect with them better. So because we're social creatures, and that's, again, I do nutrition, but everything is holistic. And you know, the biopsychosocial model, social is in there for a reason, because without social connection we're unhealthy, really, mentally. So this is going to be a weird time when you're not going to be having all those coffee meetups, like you said, with random buddies that can be really fulfilling and rewarding, like we used to do when you were in Canada. So you got to take the opportunity to, I mean, hey, that's a great example. We don't get to do coffees anymore. We can do this kind of thing, right? It's like seeing the positive side of it. So, yeah.
So Ryan, if people want to join your network, your community, where can they find you online?
So I'm on Instagram at DHD_Rye. So that's Deep Health, DHD for Deep Health Discovery _Rye, RY. I'm on Facebook. You can see my business page at Deep Health Discovery. And I've also got a website, deephealthdiscovery.com.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time. It was great talking to you, and I wish you all the best through those hard times to come, buddy.
Thanks, Shauna. You as well, man.
Take care.